This week we have an amazing gentleman, and as you can see, I've dressed not quite as well as him, but I've tried my best. It's of course Richard Vobes, and Richard is he's an internet sensation. He's also been on TV, starring in The Bill. He does The English Gentleman and The Bald Explorer originally, wasn't it, Richard?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
And you've
absolutely.
had stunning success with your kind of, I don't know what you call it. I call it truthing. Just basically seeing things that are there in plain daylight and questioning them. And
Absolutely.
unlike kind of Ike brand, you've gone more sort of, I see, more down a Neil Oliver type route, whereas you're calm. You let the people make the decisions rather than telling people what they should think. So very warm welcome, Richard. Thank you so much. It's a privilege.
Well, thank you very much, Toby, for asking me to appear on your show. It's an honor.
Oh, thank you, Richard.
And I have to say, let me say, I don't feel that I'm dressed any more, or I'm in fact less, because I've just got an old jumper on and what have you. Had I known you were wearing a waistcoat, I would have put on one of my traditional waistcoats. But the weather has just been a bit. The weather has not been great, and we've not had that many sunshine days, and so I've been lingering in jumpers far longer than I would like to be dressed. But there you go.
I'm the same. I've just had a hat on non-stop because I do the school run every day. Even
Right.
if it's like slightly warm, I still want my hat on for comfort. It's one
Yeah.
of those things. So,
Well, I do have hats because not
mm,
having much hair, you do sort of feel it when the cold wind goes whipping around
yeah.
your ears and things like that. So yeah. Um, so yes, but it's a pleasure. I'm interested to know what you want to
You're going to start
interrogate
asking
me
me
on.
questions then, won't you?
I know it's like I do so many of these interviews and
Yeah,
things. I'm always
that's cool.
starting to
Carry on. I don't
ready to
mind. You
ask
can
you.
interview me if you want. That's fine. Uh, how many personal interviews have you done actually? Because I can't find many on YouTube. There's a few.
Um, when you say personal, what do you mean like
Just
this?
yeah, just I mean, this is not with this is completely 100% non-scripted. We have no
Mm.
idea what we're going to talk about, that kind of thing.
Well, I mean, when I started doing these interviews, I mean, I must have done probably about 400 to 500 interviews with various different people who have their own disciplines and things, from people who've been talking about sovereignty, people who've been talking about lawful versus legal. Then there's people who've been talking about spiritual things, people who are talking about money creation, all the things, and people who are talking about how history has been changed, all the things that we thought we all knew, only to discover that actually we don't know as much as we thought we knew, and there's kind of a bit of a sea change in everything, and we've all gone down these different rabbit holes, and it for me the whole thing has been a complete and utter education, trying to piece all these different puzzles to work out actually what is true, and it's very difficult. um, there's a lot of fear mongering going on out there, and I do try to keep most of my stuff on the positive, because what's the point of being always fearful? It's much better to be having a much more positive outlook on life, and be as open-minded to ideas. It doesn't mean you have to accept them, but just be open-minded and do as much learning as one can. So that's been the thing. But yeah, there's been a lot of them, so I'm surprised you say you can't find them, but they do. That might well be because YouTube not very keen on me talking about certain issues, and they do censor a lot of things, or they don't. One of the problems you get is if you get near to the mark, they start unsubscribing people from your channel. That said, I'm very proud to say we've reached 200,000
You have.
subscribers,
Well done.
which is, I mean, I never thought for a moment that it would go the way it has. So I'm obviously very thrilled about that, but it does make you feel a little bit nervous, because you suddenly think, oh, I have to be very respectful on how I do all of this, because there's a lot of people who very often take what you say as gospel. And I do have to say, you've got to have your own due diligence with all of this. You've got to take what I say with a pinch of salt, and my guests, because nothing is necessarily true. It's just opinions or ideas, and people need to, take those ideas and then work out for themselves, because a little knowledge can be quite dangerous.
Yeah, yeah. Everyone has a different truth. That's what I think is so fascinating about humanity, because there is
Mm,
free will. If we go on a more spiritual path, there is free will, and that I find that fascinating that everyone's slightly different to the next. So on
yes.
one end you got David Icke, let's say, we're all going to die or whatever, and then on the other end you got Fauci or something. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
there's that duality, isn't there?
Well,
Yeah,
absolutely. And one of the things that I'm learning, talking about spirituality, is there's so much more. I mean, I was relatively spiritual, I suppose, in a sort of subconscious way, not really, thinking, yeah, there's obviously something, but not really thinking in any great detail about it, um, most of my life. And then it's been very much focused in recent times, the importance of spirituality and the fact that the weird things that are happening, not only are they happening in a physical 3D sort of space, but they're also happening in a much more spiritual way. And it is in many ways a battle of the minds and a battle of the spirits. And it's very easy to allow other people to control how you feel or to keep your vibrations low. And if you're into the spirituality and you understand how things materialize in this world, you really got to keep your vibrations high. And I've been learning all this over the last sort of 16 months or so, and it's been very much brought to the fore. So I'm fascinated by all of this because it does seem that we're a hell of a lot more powerful than we ever thought. And the things that we see in this ordinary everyday world that we feel that we're in is not all of it, and that is very liberating.
it's the ultimate liberation, really. And I don't have any answers as much as you do, and that's the fun of it, I think. Because if you knew everything, it would be quite a boring place to be, wouldn't it?
Well, you do just,
Um,
it's like, well, what do we do now? We just
yeah,
go, you'd just be hurrying up to the end because
yeah,
if you knew all the answers, it would kind of like, well, what's the point
yeah.
here?
You mentioned
Uh,
rabbit holes. I mean, they can be quite dangerous, really, and I'm very careful to just look into them and observe as neutrally as I can, although it still
mm,
gets to me. Some of the to have a sort of understanding roughly of what's going on in my external three-dimensional frequency or whatever that is.
mm. Well, that's
um,
it. Yeah.
and there's I mean I think everyone has some inkling of I don't like to call it spirituality because people think of that as a religious because
Mm,
it can be defined in scientific terms. When I've seen a video of you mentioning about the Earth spinning with the sun and the energy. That's a recent one you've done actually. The energy, it all works within a galaxy and stuff. Um, it's very very easy to get bogged down by all this negative crap, which is no better than watching the BBC News. And I know a lot of people in sort of communities I'm in that they're trying to fight the external all the time. But you can see in their eyes, I mean, one person's quite well known, he's got big subscribers, and you can see in their eyes, they're not deep down, they've got still got things, probably childhood trauma issues that they need to deal with,
mm.
and that's really hard work. I know that from experience, and it's heartbreaking. I'm going through something at the moment actually, but it's really interesting trying to I think there's a grief process, isn't there, from waking up with people, and it's very difficult. How do you, and how would you recommend people get through that in a sort of dignified and calm manner, rather than running around shouting at people, telling them what to do,
In what in the
or committing
grief
suicide?
in the grief process?
In general, when
It,
people wake up, I suppose, if you like.
right. Well, I mean, I can only really talk from my own personal journey and how I react to things. I mean, when sort of thinking about this whole situation and what was going on, and you go down the rabbit holes and you're exposed to things which challenge you deeply and challenge your long-term beliefs, and you think, no, this can't be right, that certain people are actually planning something for you, and you thought, no, I just thought things happened, I thought it was all coincidence, and these people can't be as bad as some of these rabbit holes say. and that's very challenging. And at first you can get that horrible feeling in the pit of your stomach, in which you just think, blimey, if that's all true, then we're all doomed. But then you kind of pull your socks up a little bit and go, hold on a minute. And you go through a whole gamut of reactions, don't you? From, no, actually, I'm quite angry that if that is true, that somebody else would be controlling me. But the great thing from my point of view is and interviewing all these different guests is that you get a completely different perspective from each one. And you realize that actually it's not as bad as it's all made out. I mean, ultimately, the way I consider myself, I am some spiritual something, an unnamed entity in this flesh and blood body. Um, and therefore, whatever happens to this flesh and blood body isn't the real me. It is, I'm only using it like a car and I'm driving around. But ultimately, when the car runs out of petrol, I will get out of that car and something else will happen. Maybe I get into another car or I catch a bus or, the story. I don't know what the story is once this life in this 3D space is over. So if you kind of know that, it doesn't overly matter what happens to you or what happens to others. It's almost like we're just in a theater. We're watching a film unfold, but it's very real and it's visceral and we can touch and feel things. And so that again is empowering. But then also you start to learn that actually you can control some of this by, as we said before, raising your vibrations, and mitigating against some of the negative things by staying more positive and attracting good things to you. Like attracts like. So if you have a positive mental attitude, if your world view is a glass half full, you're more likely then to draw those positive things to you, rather than if you're constantly miserable and going, oh, everything's doom and disaster. I expect I won't get this promotion, or I expect I'll get another bill for this, that, and the other. Then you're effectively attracting all those things to you. So in trying to deal with all of this, and you asked, what would you advise people to be, is to try and stay as positive as possible. Count one's blessings, I think, is absolutely essential, because we often forget just how blessed we are. I mean, anybody living in the West is not living in, say, a starving country where there's, terrible atrocities and things happening. And we know that in different parts of the world, those things are going on, or at least we're told that's what's happening. That's the other thing. I mean, now I've come to the conclusion that unless I actually see it, I don't really know, because mainstream media doesn't always give you a truthful view on things. Everything's biased and slanted one way and framed differently. So, but I do know that being positive and thinking bright things is very helpful. That
Yeah,
was a very sort of rambling answer,
great.
and I apologize for that.
No, you've answered that perfectly, actually. I mean, manifestation crops up in all ancient sort of, I wouldn't say, religions, let's call them that. I'm not a fan of using labeling stuff like that, especially even God, because it's all expression of energy, in my opinion. And there's only two things theoretically. There's love and hate, really, love and fear, from my point of view, anyway, on one level. But manifesting, I mean, I don't know if you've noticed it. When you pay attention to it, you're like, that's weird. Do you know what I mean? I think that sometimes probability is just ridiculous. Like, there's how could that possibly have happened? And I think a lot of us are having that at the moment. It's off the scale. Like, you'll think of someone, they'll ring you, kind of thing. But yeah, have you had any experiences like that?
I guess so. I mean, one of the things I used to worry about money all the time, being self-employed and being out there doing similar to what you do when you do your wedding gigs and things like that. You're always at the mercy of the phone ringing and somebody needing your services and saying, oh, I've got this thing. And I used to do that. I used to be in the entertainment business, juggling unicycling and things like that. I'm sorry?
Amazing mime act.
And mime, yes, I did. I went to mime school many years ago in the 1980s, and so I went into that as a profession. And of course, there are it's quite seasonal, a lot of the work. In the spring and the summer and the autumn you can be quite busy. In the winter you gearing up for Christmas gigs, and specific times like Halloween. There'd be Halloween jobs and bonfire nights, but then they're very limited because Fridays and Saturdays were usually the prime days, and then the rest of the week you could be twiddling your thumbs, and then people would ring you multiple times for the same date, and you can only be in one place at any one time. Um, so that, and then you get into January and February and March, and you're sort of like the phone doesn't ring and there's no work. So I've been through all of that. But in recent times, my attitude has very much changed. Not to say that money's coming in massive quantities, but I just feel that money will take care of itself. I don't worry about it. And because of that, I haven't had to sort of scrimp and save. I'm not saying that, as I say, I'm not suddenly become a millionaire, but by any means of the imagination. But I don't worry about it. My attitude is when I need it, it will be there. And things will just fall into place. And I think that takes off a lot of worry. It sometimes it's a bit just in time type of thing. But if you're always thinking that, oh, I haven't got anything, or I've got no work, or things, I think again, it goes back to what we were just saying before, that you're sort of manifesting more of that dread, that lack. Whereas if you're constantly going, no, it's fine, things will come in. And I used to get that with work in the past. I mean, I would always sort of go, because if you compare it to people who have been working for a job for 5 or 10 years and then suddenly they're unemployed and they're going, oh golly, I don't know what to do because I've not been unemployed, and I've got to go and apply for jobs. Well, in a way, that was me every time, every day. Every day you do a gig, and then that's that gig done. And you might look at the diary and there's not very much in there, and you go, oh bloody hell, I've got to find some more work. But after a while, work would just come in. It would just, word of mouth from other clients, and so, oh, you've got to book that bloke, he's quite good. And so, or the agent would get used to, and it would just happen. And I think that's part of it. It just became easier because I wasn't so much worried about it. When I started to do YouTube, and of course YouTube isn't the greatest of payers unless you can get huge views all the time, and you've got no control over the views and your audience and things like, it's a very precarious, people think, oh, it must be very easy, but actually it can be very precarious, because you make a video, you think, oh, this is going to be a good one, and nobody watches it. And then one that takes no effort whatsoever, and go, oh, that was a bit of a miserable thing, suddenly everybody's watched that one. You go, how, hang on, I can't plan for this. So with the way it's going at the moment, I'm not feeling the dread of where's the next penny coming in, which at the moment I know a lot of people are thinking that.
Yeah.
And the more that they're pushing it, that hard times are here, we've got to tighten our belts, we've got to do this, it is keeping people down. And of course it's manifesting all of it more for individual people. And once you're in that place, it is difficult to just say, oh, how can thinking make it different? How can you just sit there? You've got no money coming in. You've got this big pile of bills. You've got bailiffs banging at the door. How can somebody just sit on YouTube and say, oh, no, think that you're rich and it'll be fine? Because it's not quite that easy. And you've got to raise, because you've got to believe it, and it's a slow process that you then trust it. And once you're up there, it's okay, which is why rich people generally stay rich, because they're in that thing. They know they've got money coming in, and so they're continually manifesting it. So it's very hard for people who don't have very much to get up there, and it can take months or years. But I think it's possible. I think it is possible for anyone to be, if they meditate, they keep a positive mental attitude and laugh at their situations, which is very challenging to do. And I'm not saying that it's by any means easy, because I mean, I've, in the long distance past, I've had bailiffs banging at the door, and we had nothing. We've, with the kids in my previous marriage and stuff, we had nothing, and work was very, and we used to worry like nobody's business. We had no furniture. We barely had much food, and it was very hard. And and I lost an eye, and various things happened. But slowly, if you keep a positive outlook, things can only get better, to quote the famous song that unfortunately Tony Blair used as part of his election nearing back in 97, I think it was. If you do feel that things are going to get better, that you are already there, that you're manifesting it, that it's only a question of time for it to be fulfilled, but you're there, then I think you're helping that process.
Mm.
I'm no guru in any of this, so don't. Again, I say,
This is where I see you going to some extent in the next 5 years. More as a guru, not a guru, but I think the time of the guru is gone. It needs more people like you that can deliver the information, be at one with them, and with no ego.
Well, this is it.
You're fun
When
as
I
well.
get interviewed, I get very worried that people will look at me, especially as the raise to well, I don't want to use the word fame because I don't feel it's being famous or anything, but that when people get to know that you're around and they recognize you and things like that, I think it's very dangerous for people that when you are in the public eye a bit more, and thank God I'm not really in the public eye in terms of the general public, but within the truth movement, people know who I am. It's very dangerous because you start to believe your own publicity. And when you start to believe your own publicity, you start getting arrogant,
Yeah.
and you start feeling entitled to things, and your ego gets inflated. And that is the worst thing that can
I
happen.
don't think you will though, because you've been on TV, you've been in that environment, you've seen people in that situation. A
Yeah.
friend of mine who we talked about, she's pretty well known generally. She's very good at keeping herself humble. She hates any notoriety,
Mm.
Even another friend I've got, Tim Wilde. I mean, he's quite well known as well now, but he had people in Glastonbury jumping on his car and going hi but he's
Oh,
driving down the road. But they
gosh.
will hate all that,
Yeah. I
Um,
couldn't bear it. And it is, I'm at that sort of strange level where you can walk down the road and the people who do know you, they've seen the videos, but then generally they're on your side, and they agree with what we talk about.
mm.
And so they'll come up and they'll say, thanks for the videos, or it's lovely to meet you, or this. I don't walk down the street and people just call across the street. Well, sometimes that actually doesn't happen, which is a bit weird.
but
But by people who have who are not negative stuff.
I think the only that you saw it happen to Russell Brand, I think it was last year, but that's his problem because he's not he's lived that lifestyle. But
Mm.
that was a targeted thing for him. No one can dislike you really because you're just honest and you're
But
funny. You come across as a genuine person and you have the most amazing wife ever, so that always helps. So like Julia's lovely, isn't she? She's
she
like,
is absolutely gorgeous. Yeah.
uh,
But I think honesty and being humble
yeah,
are the most essential ingredients, really, especially when you are trying just to impart information that you've learnt. If you've got ideas or opinions, and I've very opinionated, but if also you can listen. I mean, I think that's the important and the biggest lesson I've learned running the channel with all the different people that I've had as guests is being open-minded and listening to their whatever it is they want to impart or talk about, and not being critical or shutting them down or putting your own view on top of what they do. Now, I do get criticized for that because sometimes people will say things and they'll say, well, why didn't you challenge them on that, Richard? And I said, well, that's not the nature of the show. I'm not the BBC going in there as a forensic journalist saying, oh, but that doesn't make sense. And unless it's so blatantly obvious that it doesn't stand up, where I might question a bit, mostly they're talking about stuff that I have no idea, bioresonance or the creation of money. And I'm learning and going, oh, okay. And
yeah.
then you might learn something and go, well, I'm not sure that they were 100% correct, but I'm happy for them to put their views on. And say to the audience, look, as I said at the beginning, I think the audience have a job of their own, not to accept what has been said. And we've seen that with mainstream media. We've seen mainstream media, they say things to you, which is heavily biased, programming you how to think. And I think we have to be incredibly open-minded and say, okay, I'll take what you say, but I'm going to put critical thinking against it and decide for myself whether I agree or disagree with you. And I do try to, say that in as many videos as I can. This is just my opinion. You don't have to agree with me. And if you disagree with me, disagree on that one thing, but we can still be friends because there's probably many things that we do agree with.
Yeah.
And
I mean, it's like when you try and talk about actual, we say critical thinking, talk logically to someone about something that they kind of know it's true.
yeah,
They don't want to go there and just get angry because it will blow their comfy, cozy little world apart. And that's painful. We've all been through it. I mean, I saw you in an interview talking about 9/11 at the time and how you just went along with it and didn't really pay much attention. That's what most people do, I think. So
yes.
like naming people like that as sheeple or whatever, I think is unfair because I think most human beings they mean well in the way they are. I think a lot of people, if they knew that they're not doing things, they're not evil, they're just doing what they think is right to be doing, And a good example of that is the doctor guy on YouTube. What's his name?
Oh, there's many. Oh, Dr. John Campbell.
Yeah, John Campbell, because he's actually on. He went through the whole process live. Yeah, I thought it was quite amazing, really. He was all for it, and then he sort of hang on a minute, and then he flipped.
Well, isn't it funny? We're not
Yeah,
allowed to change our mind.
yeah,
And people say, oh, well, he was, as you say, he was all for the thing,
mm,
and then he changed his mind when he started to get some more information
yeah,
about it, even
mm,
though he'd had it himself.
yeah,
And people
yeah,
said, oh, but I wouldn't trust him because he was pushing it. Well, at the time, everyone was pushing it, and we all, thought, oh, this is the thing that we should be doing.
mm,
But as you think about something more deeply, as I try to think about it and go, well, hang on a minute, does that make sense? Because it's a big thing to have something put into your body. Does that make sense? And if it doesn't, shouldn't we question it? And if people won't let you question it, well, that's very strange. Why would you not be allowed to question it? Same with things like global warming. Well, the science is fixed, but it's not really fixed because some people disagree with it and they haven't had a satisfactory answer. And then I sort of fell much more into that. Well, I mean, I never really fell for that whole thing from
But
the
that's why they
beginning.
did. That's why they changed it from global warming. They couldn't prove that it was getting warmer. They had to change
Yeah,
climate change. But yeah,
absolutely. But if you change your mind, you're seen to be weak. But to me, it's like if you change your mind, you've listened to people, you've thought about it, and we change our mind all the time, don't we? I mean, you might go into I don't know, a restaurant, and you say, oh, I fancy a nice a chicken curry or something, and then you see somebody and they've got a nice, I don't know, beef Wellington or something. You go, oh, actually, that looks nice. We must be allowed to change our mind, otherwise we're all going to be in a very narrow-minded area, and without being able to sort of embrace other people's ideas. So clearly we can, but people don't seem to like it for some reason. Um, and I think if you're able, especially if you're a prominent person and you've changed your mind, in a way that John Campbell did, and I think that should be embraced. Um, it's only when people change their mind, perhaps cynically, and they read the room and they go, oh, I've got this policy, like a politician, I've got this policy, we're going to push this. Oh no, that won't get us votes. We'll change to this. But that might not be the right decision. They should have stayed with their original decision. It may not get votes, but it may be the best thing for the country. But just because they want to be elected next time round, they might change their mind. So it swings and roundabouts, isn't it, really?
yeah, yeah. And one thing I've sort of thought about recently, because this kind of all got on top of me a bit, not badly,
Mm.
but paying attention to certain, like I like Awaken with JP because it's quite satiristic and funny. It just takes the piss really, which is great. And I think you're good with that. You're amazing with your words. And Neil Oliver as well, and that's more poetry based. I thought that was really good.
Mm.
I think he's probably the fact he was on mainstream TV as well. That was a real help for a lot of people, and that's what you deliver, I think, to people, which is why you've gained so much sort of you got 200 subscribers, because people need someone to go to for some form of information that they can work out for themselves. And I think you probably helped hundreds of thousands of people, I'd imagine, and a lot, on a, individually.
That's a big responsibility,
Yeah,
isn't it?
I think you
That's a
probably have in
huge.
the whole, because one
Yeah.
person could take one of your videos, decide to set up a group of, I don't know, 4 people down the pub and have a
Mm.
discussion once a week. And that's what it's about, open discussion and then coming up with a solution. And I
Yes.
think we both agree that actually fighting something that doesn't work is not the best idea, and actually creating something new is the way forward. And showing, you see it in any schoolyard, you show a good lead, then people will follow you, and they will add to your
Yes.
idea. That's the way
Yeah.
forward.
I mean, it is. I do worry that sometimes you present ideas and people sort of just take it at face value.
Mm.
And particularly with stuff when you're talking about legal advice, I don't give legal advice. I'm not a legally trained person. We say that numbers of times in the videos. And I'm not a lawyer or a solicitor or a barrister or anything like that. But you're thinking about what is right and what is wrong, and how the legal system has been used to influence people in certain ways, or to make people behave in certain ways. So we're challenge it with critical thinking or different ideas. But I worry if somebody would to watch it and go, oh, well, Richard Vobes says this is correct. And it's like, I'm not saying it's correct. I'm just saying it's my opinion. And people have to definitely work it out for themselves. All I'm just saying is, here's a train of thought that you might wish to entertain, but don't necessarily follow it to the letter,
Yeah.
because we've all got to make those decisions up for ourselves. And if it's something new, then learn about that subject from all different angles before you perhaps challenge whatever it might be, a legal bill or the council tax or whatever it is that you want to challenge. But people
Yeah.
have to stand in their own power to do that. They can't just say, oh, here's a template, we just write this and it's done, because that really, then they don't know enough about the subject. And I don't know enough about all the different subjects that I've been presented to. But you pick and choose a few that you think, actually, I want to learn a lot more about that. Like we were talking about spirituality, I want to understand what it is to be a human being, if you like, and what does that mean. And you mentioned gurus before. There's no way that I would entertain the idea of presenting myself as somebody who has all the answers and this is the road that we should follow. It's just, these are my ideas at this moment in time, but they might change
Yeah, exactly.
as I find out more.
Yeah. And I mean, outward consciousness manifests from within. And I think that all starts from just observing your thoughts, I think.
Mm.
And then that creates self-awareness. Should be the first goal for anyone, to have self-awareness as well as critical thinking of the external environment. But it's difficult. You will find that. I mean, any study of cultism or guruism or whatever, just look at Catholicism or Christian. People do like to have guru figures and people they can basically rely on, which is, you're just externalizing. If you overdo it, that's great, but if you overdo it, all you do is rely on other people, and that's not good. It's like going to the doctors when you're ill. You can actually self-diagnose yourself pretty easily
Yes.
at home these days, and it's usually something quite simple, just perception and being happy, trying to be positive. It's all, reality is down to mindset. If that's all there is, and there isn't manifestation or spirituality or anything like that, you're going to live and die. You're an animal. There's definitely something in mindset.
Well,
As
we're very unique creatures, aren't we, as human beings, that we can choose our emotions. And I mean, when you observe animals, they exist very much in the now. They're not really planning much for the future, other than they have instincts to go, oh, a squirrel might have that, I got to collect nuts and then I'll bury them. And he may or may not remember where he's buried them. But if he buries enough, presumably he'll go looking in the most likely places he had buried them, and there they'll be. And they don't seem to dwell too much on the past. It's very difficult to think that they, other than, again, perhaps they're aware that that human over there or that fox chases me. Some sort of instinctive thought process must go on. But humans, the fact that we do dwell in the past and base things that we've done in the past and how our future might play out, we don't spend enough time in the now and experiencing this very moment that we're enjoying, because we're often doing, what's going to happen in the future, worrying about the future and worrying about what happened in the past. But we can choose, and it's not easy, but we can choose if we're feeling a bit down or just, meh, sort of like nothing. We can go, do you know what? I'm gonna be happy. We can, bung on a bit of music or watch a comedian on YouTube or something, or go out and take a walk in nature and change our mood. We have that ability, and that's very powerful, because and also, you could do the old thing of smiling at somebody and change somebody else's mood. You see somebody coming and you smile, and then they may smile back, and that may have lifted their whole day. So, somebody smiled to me today and I was feeling a bit rubbish. And there's somebody told me this rhyme: smile a while, and while you smile, another smiles. And soon there's miles and miles of smiles, and life's worthwhile because you smiled. And you can set off a chain reaction which is affecting loads of different, it's like the butterfly effect, really. A tiny little thing can change so many other people's lives for the positive. Same with the negative, because you could do the same and just say, "Oh, you're looking a bit miserable today," and they go, "Oh, am I? Oh, maybe I'm ill." And you've changed somebody's train of thought. So the more that we're aware that we can actually change our own mood and go and look at, another thing is, every time you look in the mirror, smile, because you're getting the feedback of yourself and go, "Oh, I'm a smiley, happy person." You're telling your subconscious, I'm a happy, smiley. Because if you look in the mirror and just like, "Oh God, I look a bit miserable," you're programming yourself, aren't you? So I think it's very important that all the feedback we get of ourselves, like looking in the mirror or being aware of our moods, is as positive as possible, because we are then creating that future that we've spoken about in a much more, even if it is just how we deal on a daily basis, as you said. But if we're thinking, "Oh, I'm a happy, jolly person," it's a lot nicer to deal with life, and people accept you much happier. We'll have him over because he's always smiling and laughing and joking, rather than that one over there who's as miserable as sin. We don't want him.
Sometimes people that can be deadly funny, especially using satire.
Exactly. Yeah. So
It still make them laugh. So.
Yes, that's right. I mean, there are some great comics, aren't there, that are as miserable as sin, or apparently, but they're hugely funny, and you like them because they are a sort of miserable. They have that miserable thing, but they know what they're doing. They're not genuinely down, because you catch the vibration from them.
Yeah. Mentioning vibration, actually, I don't know if it must be proven now scientifically that the body has a has a field around it.
Yeah, I
Apparently
think so.
stretching up to 2 miles. I don't know whether that's true or not, but the definitely like a few meters. I pick it up from. I know if my wife's in a bad mood, she's very powerful as a being. I know if she's in a bad mood or not when I'm upstairs. If my son's going nutty, I just can't cope. I'm like, oh, my eldest especially. I have to just leave the room sometimes. So you can actually upset people. And speaking of the power of now, the power of now, it's a good book, Eckhart Tolle. It's quite old now. That's about the only thing that does exist is now. Like the past is the past, the present hasn't started. So that leads to the whole manifestation theory. But he was healing someone who came into his thing or doing something with him, and he left a load. And a woman came in who's whoa. And he obviously realized the energy in that. He's like, and she had to leave the whole house. It was like really dodgy. And he then went to a restaurant, and he was sure it was that energy that was carrying. This guy just went mental. This guy kicked off, and he obviously goes to this restaurant quite a lot. And the owner came over and goes, "Was it you that did that?" But yeah, anyway, I think surrendering as well. The surrender experiment by Michael, whatever his name is. Surrender experiment's a good one. Just surrendering to reality, and as you said before, not being fearful of things.
Yes.
And it's amazing what happens when you're like that. And I think
So just to explain
magical.
to me the surrender thing, because from what
Mm,
I understand, what I understand is that you can be going through some turbulent times,
yeah,
and that you can sort of take yourself back and just look through your eyes as if you're watching it in a relaxed, as if you're inside your head, as it were, in an armchair, going, okay, this is happening around me, but actually, rather than being involved in it and attacking it, I'm just going to take this back seat and witness it rather than be in the
yeah.
down. Is that what you mean?
Um, I think not. It's just not worry. It's about being in the present moment, which
Mm,
I do quite well. I've been doing that for some time. Just being in the present moment, not really worrying about the future or planning the future. And I don't know. It's difficult to explain, really.
yes,
And
yes.
just putting your passion into everything. And I think what you do with your wife going out and about, that's you must be in that state quite a lot because a lot of it's unplanned.
Mm.
You're actually capturing. It's beautiful. You're kind of logging what that at the present moment, which is quite cool. And you can watch it back and go, "Oh, I didn't notice that." And then 20
Oh
years
yeah.
time, that's great. You can like look at us. How cool are we? And it's a great. I don't know why you've got such low views, really, because I would have thought Americans would have loved that.
Yeah, the English couple
Yeah,
doing our
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Um, it's a relatively new channel,
Oh,
so
okay.
because we used to do it on the main channel,
Mm,
but when I was starting to talk about the truth things, the sovereignty things, and all of this, and the rabbit holes, it didn't seem appropriate then to suddenly bung on the English couple, which is just Julia and I
mm,
quintessentially being as English as we are,
mm.
and that in and of itself is a strange thing because people have different idea of what being English is, and that's just our idea of, well, it's just us, and we just happen to be
Yes,
English. We're a couple,
yeah,
and we're
non
quite,
contrived, isn't it? Really,
yeah.
it's quite unique, really, to some extent, because we
Well,
know
that's
what
very
real
kind of
English
you to
is
say
quite
so.
right. So yeah, I'm going to Alicante Airport a couple of weeks, and then you can really see what the English people, especially if you go down to Benidorm or something.
Oh, blimey, yeah.
We're not going there though, but I don't know where I am now. That's pretty much it. Any questions?
No, well, I mean, it's. I always like these conversations where there's no real fixed agenda,
So
and you can
that
just
is
sort of,
being present, isn't it?
yeah, and that's right. You're just talking about things that occur to you.
Mm.
Um, so I like that because things will occur to you that perhaps in a more rigid interview where you're talking about a specific thing doesn't. And I think it's enjoyable from an audience. Well, at least I hope it is enjoyable, and it's not too self-indulgent, and
No,
that
not at all.
people.
Don't worry. It's nice for you to actually talk a bit more because often you're listening, aren't you? So
Well, I do a
and that's
lot of
great.
talking in my monologues, of course, but
Oh yes,
with the
yeah, of course, yeah,
interviews, yeah, the interviews, I am the nodding dog who's going, "Oh yeah, and yeah,
yeah,
that's interesting."
yeah. And that is that scripted at all? You obviously come up with ideas for that beforehand, don't you?
Well, for the
Yeah,
monologues,
that's the point. I was just thinking that earlier. I saw the one with your daughter, and I thought that was very well put together.
I can't remember which one was
She
that
was in New
now.
Zealand, and you had a problem with
Oh,
her boss made her take
oh yes,
stuff.
yes. So
And
that one I think was called Now It's Personal, because
yeah,
my daughter is in New Zealand, as you say,
mm,
and she was there during the lockdown, and she didn't want to take the medical intervention.
yeah,
But like everybody employed, they were very much mandated or forced
mm,
to take it if they wished to stay. And because she's an English girl, um, and she wanted to stay, and she was still trying to get to whatever they call it, citizenship or whatever it is they call it now, um, so that she could claim that she had to stay for a certain time. So she didn't want to come back. Plus the fact she couldn't come back because she hadn't got the thing, so they wouldn't let her on an airplane. So in the end, she was forced to take this bloody thing, much to my terrible chagrin, because I do worry about her. But of course, it's her own decision, and but she didn't take very much. She just took the one, thank goodness. And I have a feeling it may only have been saline anyway, because I'm not convinced that they all were full of the various things that they're supposed to be full of. And she's been okay, but it was really without her consent, and I think that's just awful. Nobody should have anything put into their body without their consent. And so many people did have not they didn't really, they agreed to something because the pressure of mainstream media told them to, and they didn't really understand it, and they've been so programmed to obey what the government told them to do that's not really consent. It's false consent, really. But it was very personal.
Pizza, though? That's the question.
Did
she get a free pizza or cinema tickets?
I don't think so.
Oh, damn. Or don't.
I know, when it came down to, well, we'll inject this nonsense into you, but you can have a free pizza.
Yeah.
The most healthy thing on this planet. Yeah, great, thanks.
Yeah.
That's really helped.
That's when people are being bribed. That's like, that should be the biggest alarm bell. But anyway, we won't go down that path.
Yeah, why are you bribing me to have something that I ordinarily wouldn't normally take?
Yeah. Okay, we'll change subject, because we could.
We can end up.
I think that's been done to death, especially on your channel. And it is what it is, really. And human nature won't change, I don't think. I mean, I've read a book, David Hume, A Treatise to Human Nature, recently, which is bloody hard work to get through because it's quite old. But one other book I've read, which really sort of I look at when I think I'm having a bad day, which is Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl, which is quite a good book. And I always think it's not that bad. I'm not in a Nazi concentration camp.
No, that's very true. You look very comfortable there in your armchair.
Yeah, and it's really nice. I mean, I rescued 3 bees in the last 2 days, and it gives me, as in the Blur Park life, it gives me a sense of enormous well-being, even though it's still there on the flower. But I won't walk past it on the dog walk. But I think a lot of humans, especially in the truther movements and stuff, or whatever, really, in any groups, they can't sort of zoom out as much as I've just talked about the now and being present. I think zooming out sometimes and helicoptering stuff really does help. If you look at things in 50 years, 100 years, even 1,000-year periods, when you know a lot about history, for example, history repeats, human natures remain the same. When I look at the stock market most days, and it's amazing, it's always the same thing. The institutions pump it up, all the public get in, then they just pull the rug. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I do think humanity is progressing in a positive way. If you look at things on a larger period, assuming let's say in documented history that's actually happened potentially, and not being too badly, edited by popes or whatever. It is getting better. People are nicer to each other, and I think there is a whole. I'm not going to go too deep down there, but there is this whole sort of rise up in sort of vibrational frequency to some extent. I think that's amazing, really, because you can see it happening if you pull out, focusing on, for example, the agriculture stuff at the moment, which you're heavily into, aren't you? I had an interview with Catherine McBean a few days ago, but there's pros and cons to that at the moment. But if you look back to how industrial farming was not that long ago, like DDT, for example, and now all these birds of prey are all back. I think that's amazing. So there are positives, and even set aside, bringing hedgerows back, letting bits of fields actually grow up, so bees can come along and pollinate all those little insects, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. Yes, there is other stuff going on. So what do you think about the future going forward with regards to humanity? It's a bit of a big question, but also for your role in it.
Oh golly, God knows what my role in it will be. But I personally, I have a very positive. I think we're in very difficult times at the moment where we're being squeezed by lots of different agendas, and there's lots of misinformation out there. However, I think, as you say, humanity is that when you are squeezed, some people don't know how to deal with it, and that might be the vast majority, and they're just looking for a way out. They don't necessarily know they're looking for a way out, but if they found it, I think most people are like water, and that they'll find the line of least resistance, and they'll just go along with what seems to be a sensible idea. And then there'll be those people who I think will be the signposts of the future, who've been thinking about the problems that we have and are looking at new ways. So looking at new types of farming, new food types of food, health, alternatives, because we have all been living in a very narrow way of living. That, take health, for example. Everybody feels that modern medicine has been the only way of dealing with it. And for centuries, we've had alternative. It wasn't alternative then, it was medicine. You'd go to the plants and herbalists and apothecaries, and you'd have lotions and potions and perhaps Chinese acupuncture and things like that, meditation, all sorts of different things. But science came along and said, oh, no, that's all rubbish, it's all too fuzzy and silly, that we've got this scientific approach to everything, and actually what we'll do is you'll give you these white pills and that will solve the problem. But of course it doesn't actually solve the problem. It gets rid of it gets rid of the effect. So you've got a headache, but what was causing the headache? What was it? Maybe it was your Wi-Fi that was around, or maybe you were too stressed, or maybe you're breathing wrong air, or the water's wrong for you, or whatever it is, or you're drinking too many drinks at night, alcoholic drinks, or whatever it is. Yeah. So, and those sort of things are not being looked at. So a more holistic approach is being thought about. And I think that's where we're now at with humanity. We're starting to say, actually, we don't have to live in this very narrow band. There's lots of interesting things. And the internet, social media, and podcasts like this are enabling people to have that open mind and to see, oh, there are all these other things. I didn't know about that because mainstream media hasn't told us much about that. Doctors never ask you about your diet unless you're grossly overweight. They never sort of say, oh, you need to change your diet terribly much. They say, here's a pill, take that. And if that doesn't work, I'll give you another pill. It's like, actually, if maybe I got a highly processed food and that healthy food, that might actually work better in the end. So I think we are, we're in that point now where we're beginning to realize there's more to life than meets the eye. And there's lots of different things. And it's very exciting. I think it is very exciting. And the other people who haven't quite caught up with that, as I say, I think they will follow. Once they see people are healthier and not sort of down in the dumps, and they realize that being happy is actually okay, it's okay to be happy, I think people will just follow along. And it's our job, I feel, that those who've been thinking about this for a bit, to help those and just point the way and say, look, have you thought about this, or have you thought about that? Which is what I do on my channel. And I'm very blessed, I have to say, and I do count my blessings on that all these guests have come in and they've helped me to understand that myself, so that I can then point those things out and say, well, have you listened to that interview, or have a listen to this chap? He's got some, I'm not taking any credit for it. I'm just a signpost saying over there might be something that's useful. So I think we as humans, we're going to push back against all this tyranny and dark stuff, and we're going to thrive. And I'm very, very happy and positive about it. So I feel it's all good.
So yeah, you're doing your live shows, aren't you? Which is great. I mean, I think that's really nice because you get straight in front of people, and you are bloody funny. You're hilarious. And your show isn't about. I think the second half normally is about what you've just been discussing, but the first half's about you, which is really nice. And your TV days, like as an extra on the bill and all that. You've created your own TV shows. You're a professional mime artist, very good one as well. And
you've only seen a snippet of what we used to do with the
I can just imagine. I mean, what you can just pull out the hat, especially your Carry On impressions.
No,
did do any Sid James though?
No, Sid James very difficult. I can't do Sid James.
Okay, I like doing a bit of Sid James, but I won't do it now.
Oh, will you not? No, I do a bit of Sid James.
My wife hates it, so I can probably watch this.
Right, fair enough.
I'm learning. And I found that link, didn't I, for you, with every single Carry On.
Oh yes, that's right. Yes, thank you for that.
I was like, wow, every one of them, even Carry On Constable.
Yeah, that's a brilliant one. Constable.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
Carry On Constable.
Can't think what else I was going to ask you. Yeah, that's pretty much it, I think. What else did we cover?
Well, we've covered, I must have done an hour or so people are probably ready to go to sleep, I should think.
Cool. Well, it's been great talking to you. Maybe we could follow up in a year. or a bit later to see how things have got on. Really, am I right in thinking your views gone down slightly? So I think
Yes, I think
that's what it was.
what happens is that as you get closer to things that are important that
Yeah,
perhaps YouTube or the censors don't want you to know about, they do start to what do they call it? There's a term for it which I've forgotten now. But they sort of censor you a bit, or it
yeah,
you throttle you. They throttle who gets to see your things. And
yeah,
some people find, oh, I've suddenly become unsubscribed. I didn't
yeah.
unsubscribe from, or the notifications been switched off. They do a few cheeky tricks like
Well, I
that,
noticed
which
that.
is
So some of them, the ones before, got like 450,000 views, and these have slightly less. But if it helps at all, I've noticed because I do a lot of positive living events, and I go run alongside Jackie White quite often, who's in Hampshire, and a lot of people that I've been seeing have been pulling back from those events, and which is great, externalizing their experience and
right.
learning, going in on themselves, especially last year. So I think that might actually be part of it, and that includes a lot of the freedom community type people. I think because they intuitively realize it's not doing them any good. And what they actually need to do, which I alluded to before, is kind of deal with themselves or go spend more time with their family and be
Mm,
positive. And
mm,
I mean, anyone can be spiritual and not even realize it. I
mm,
mean, just you could be a footballer, and or whatever. As long as you're in love and not in fear, that's the most important thing I think for any human journey. But
mm.
before we finish, anything to add that you've in your thoughts that you could think that would help people or
Well, I mean, the only thing I really, as you said, that I'm very much into the farming situation. I think we are in quite a turbulent time in terms of farms and food. And I think it's absolutely essential that people do think about what they eat and, where possible, avoid supermarkets. And I know this might go against the grain for a lot of people, but that I think
fun?
people do need to think about what food they're eating from the supermarkets, because most of it's highly processed and the nutritional value is pretty slim. And that's what, with the weather being so controlled at the moment, which might surprise a few people, i.e., we're not getting enough vitamin D from the sunshine and things. Um, Eating as much healthy food as one can and reducing the amount of highly processed stuff would be the thing, and supporting farmers where you can by buying from farmers markets or farm shops and those sort of places, because without those people producing that kind of food, we would be in a very difficult place. So that would be my only thought, and I should be doing more of that kind of stuff on the show. Food is something we take for granted. We always assume the supermarkets will be full. And even when we were all in the lockdown, it was funny how people were actually stocking up on loo roll and pasta more than proper food, which is a
But
bit weird. People are strange.
yeah, well, thank you so much. It's been a great chat. Nice meander, actually. We can have another one at some point if
Yeah.
you're willing.
No worries at all. It's been
And
it's been
I
an
hope
honor. Thank you so much, Toby.
well, I hope to catch up with you at some point. It'd be lovely to sort of meet in person again at
Yeah.
soon, maybe. Or
Have a drink down the pub.
yeah, lovely. And a nice, I had a beautiful steak and ale pie, homemade one yesterday. So they make them. You can come down my pub if you want.
Fantastic. That sounds good.
Nice talking to you.
Brilliant.
Thank you so much, Richard. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I think the whole anyone that sort of realizes the truth and wants to find it, you're an absolute hero. For,
Thank you.
not only for me, but to them.
Oh,
So
that's
keep
very
up the good
kind of you.
work.
I will do my best.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Bye bye.